Welcome to the deep dive. Get ready, because we're plunging headfirst into a truly extraordinary narrative today. We're looking at a claim emerging from the sands of Iraq concerning one of history's most legendary figures, King Gilgamesh.
Often linked, of course, to the biblical Nimrod. It's quite a connection to start with.
Absolutely. And the source material for this deep dive is an audio excerpt.
Right, and it weaves together, well, quite a lot. Ancient history, myth, and some very modern, pretty controversial speculation.
About the alleged discovery of his tomb.
And maybe even his remains. That's where it gets really interesting.
That's right. Our mission today is simply to unpack the specific claims presented in this source.
No judgment, just laying out what it says.
Exactly. We're going to explore the connections the source draws between, archaeology, ancient texts like the Epic of Gilgamesh, Genesis, modern genetics, and even recent geopolitical events in Iraq. It covers a lot of ground.
So you're about to hear a story, as presented by this source, that touches on supposed archaeological findings. These controversial theories about DNA, Nephilim,
Right.
and some very specific, and let's be clear, unverifiable claims involving preserved remains and alleged military operations.
It's definitely a narrative that, according to this source, links the deep past to the very recent present in some truly, surprising ways.
You could say that again.
So let's dive in. Let's see what this source lays out for us.
All right, so where does this deep dive begin, according to our source? It kicks off with claims out of Iraq.
Archaeological ones specifically.
Yes, archaeological. It talks about a German-led expedition there, and they were using modern technology. The source describes it as looking into the ground using differences in magnetization in the soil.
Ah, okay. So like geophysical survey, mapping without digging.
Pretty much, yeah. A way to digitally map what's under the surface.
And the picture this painted, according to the source, was the ancient city of Uruk.
That's the claim. And it paints a pretty vivid image, calling it a Venice in the desert. Kind of evocative, right?
It is. Gives you a sense of the canals and water.
And not just a small piece of it either. The source claims they mapped more than 100 hectares. That's huge.
Wow. Okay. And within that digital map, what do they supposedly find?
All sorts of structures, apparently. The source mentions garden structures and field structures as depicted in the epic.
So matching the ancient text.
And so the source claims, yeah. And also areas of Babylonian houses, like a whole city layout emerging.
It sounds like a detailed picture of the ancient landscape.
And infrastructure, too. They mention finding an incredibly sophisticated system of canals, described as a highly developed system.
Which fits the Venice in the desert idea.
Exactly. And the mapping apparently showed structures destroyed by flooding, highlighting that constant interplay with water.
Okay, interesting context. But the big reveal, the central archaeological claim in the source.
Right, the main event, so to speak.
Is the discovery they interpreted as Gilgamesh's tomb?
Yes. They found a building just outside the city limits, specifically located, the source says, in the middle of the former Euphrates rivers.
In the riverbed.
That's the description. A building found there, which the source says could be interpreted as a burial.
And does the source offer any support for that interpretation?
It does. It includes a quote attributed to a John Fasenber from the Bavarian Department of Historical Monuments.
Okay.
He's quoted saying the structure looks very similar to that described in the epic.
Oh, wow.
In the book, actually, I said, of inscribed clay tablets. So a direct comparison to the ancient text.
And what did those ancient tablets say about his burial, according to the source?
Well, as mentioned in the source, the tablets supposedly described Gilgamesh as being buried under the Euphrates.
Under the river.
In a tomb apparently constructed when the waters of the ancient river parted flowing following his death.
So the source is arguing that this specific location and potential structure lines up remarkably well with that ancient story.
That's the connection it's making, yeah. Archaeology potentially backing up the myth.
Okay, so that's the foundation, the archaeological claim about the tomb. But the source doesn't just leave it there, does it?
Oh, not at all. It quickly pivots to explain why it sees this find as much more significant than just, another old building.
And this is where it starts connecting some pretty ancient dots in a very particular way.
Exactly. The source introduces the idea that Gilgamesh wasn't just a king or hero in these beliefs, but possibly part human, part alien, part angel. That's the terminology used.
Okay, that's a leap.
It uses specific terms from the source. Nephilim, Anunnaki Nephilim. connecting them explicitly to fallen angels, the offspring of the fallen angels.
And it references Genesis 6?
Yes, directly referencing Genesis 6. The source flat out labels him a hybrid.
Right. And then the source makes another major connection, doesn't it? Linking Gilgamesh to Nimrod.
It does, even suggesting they might be one and the same figure.
And how does the source describe Nimrod?
Pretty standard stuff initially. Son of Cush, descendant of Noah, king of Babylon. But crucially, it highlights him as the one who built the Tower of Babel. And the source offers its own interpretation of the tower, calling it the gateway to heaven to defy God.
I see. So linking Gilgamesh, the potential Nephilim hybrid, with Nimrod, the builder of the defiant Tower of Babel. That's a key step in the source's argument.
It seems to be, yeah. Setting the stage for what comes next.
Now, this is where the narrative presented in the source takes a significant, maybe controversial turn.
You could definitely say controversial.
It connects this ancient figure, the alleged tomb, to modern science.
Specifically, yeah, to what the source describes as an overwhelming amount of information that has come to light recently of DNA genetic manipulation and its use in science and technology even today.
Okay, DNA manipulation. And how does it connect that to Gilgamesh Nimrod?
Well, building on that premise, the source presents a pretty remarkable theory. It frames it as a question, but one it definitely leans into.
Which is?
Was the Iraq invasion a forward smokescreen for the enablement of Western powers to gain ancient alien technologies and possible DNA for future engineering and a possible resurrection and cloning of a DNA angel, Gilgamesh Nimrod?
Wow. Okay, so it's suggesting the entire conflict might have been a cover.
A cover to get Gilgamesh's DNA or maybe technology? That's the theory the source puts forward.
And the source is quite direct about the belief behind this theory, right?
Very direct. It states, quote, "There are those who believe that that is so.
Right.
There are those who believe that there was a driving force behind the resurrection of Nimrod, Gilgamesh. That was the primary reason for the East events."
So it's attributing the entire Iraq war, essentially, to this desire to resurrect or clone Gilgamesh Nimrod, according to these unnamed believers, it cites.
That's the direct line the source draws. Ancient myth driving modern geopolitics. It's a huge claim.
And the source also points to timing, doesn't it, as potentially significant.
It does. It notes the claim about finding Gilgamesh's tomb came 1 month after archaeologists digging in her desert sands claimed to have found the tomb of Gilgamesh. Seems like a slight repetition in the source's phrasing there. And it also connects it to another finding, just 4 years after the secret chambers of Osiris's empty tomb were found in Egypt. Suggesting a pattern, maybe?
Implying these discoveries aren't isolated, perhaps.
That seems to be the implication presented.
Okay, so from the theory about DNA, the source then gets even more specific about actual physical remains.
Yes, it goes from the theoretical possibility of DNA to claims about Gilgamesh's actual body.
How? What's the basis for that in the source?
It references an interview on something called Omega Men Radio featuring Tom Hord and a Steve Quayle.
Okay, Steve Quayle. And what does he claim, according to the source?
Well, as relayed by the source, Steve Quayle makes this striking second-hand claim. He says he talked to Special Operations General who validated that, verified that, and absolutely was there when Gilgamesh's remains were found.
A general saw the remains.
That's Quayle's claim, passed on by the source. And Quayle quotes this general as saying Gilgamesh, quote, "He was in a state of remarkable preservation."
Remarkably preserved after thousands of years.
That's the extraordinary claim presented in the source attributed to Quayle's general contact.
And the source adds another layer to this, about the location.
A very pointed detail, yeah. This alleged encounter happened in the literal vicinity of where the United States built its largest military complex.
Implying a connection between the discovery and the military presence.
It certainly leads the listener that way. And it includes the claim from the source that, quote, "An advanced team special operations went in there to grab all that stuff."
Grab all that stuff, meaning the remains.
Presumably, yes. The implication is a covert military retrieval.
And the source really emphasizes Quayle's certainty, doesn't it?
It does. It quotes him directly. What I'm telling you is based on multi-star general's eyewitness reports to me who was there. He said they have Gilgamesh's remains.
A multi-star general's eyewitness report. That's quite specific.
It is. And the source immediately circles back to the earlier theory, explicitly stating the perceived purpose behind this alleged recovery.
Let me guess. The DNA.
You got it. The whole point is to extract the DNA. That's the source's bottom line on this part.
Okay, so we have the alleged tomb, the Nephilim Nimrod link, the invasion as cover theory, and now specific claims of preserved remains recovered by the military for DNA extraction.
According to the source's narrative structure, yes.
And it doesn't stop there. The source broadens the DNA theme even further.
It does. It brings in the Human Genome Project.
The actual Human Genome Project. How?
The source claims it has also been told, another unattributed claim there,
Right.
that the whole point of the Human Genome Project is to locate specific genetic markers for the disembodied spirits to reanimate their host body that's brought back.
Okay, wait. So the source is linking the entire Human Genome Project to finding docking sites for ancient spirits in resurrected bodies, like Gilgamesh's.
That's the connection the source makes, yeah. Linking this massive public scientific effort to its narrative about ancient beings and DNA resuscitation.
Yeah.
It's ambitious.
Ambitious is one word for it. So, according to this source, how do all these threads tie together? The tomb, Nephilim remains, military, DNA, genome project.
The source weaves them all into a specific kind of apocalyptic picture. It calls this grand convergence, Babylon rising, very turn of the Nephilim.
Babylon rising, okay.
Yeah.
So it sees these alleged events as fulfilling some kind of prophecy or return.
That seems to be the framing. And it again points to Steve Quayle's belief, as described in the source, that this entire sequence of events and objectives getting the DNA, the potential resurrection, is indeed the real reason of remaining in Iraq for the better part of the last decade.
So the source, through Quayle, attributes the long U.S. presence in Iraq directly to this supposed Gilgamesh project.
That's the claim presented.
And how does the source interpret the eventual withdrawal of U.S. troops?
As evidence that the mission, this alleged mission, was successful, the source says the withdrawal tells us that they have accomplished whatever it is they needed to do.
Implying they got what they came for. The DNA or whatever stuff the special ops team grabbed.
That's the clear implication, which leads the source to pose a final question.
Which is?
It makes us wonder what or who else may be coming out of Babylon with them.
Ooh, okay. Suggesting something, or someone, was extracted along with the troops leaving.
That's the ominous note it strikes.
And the source wraps this all up with a biblical quote.
Yes. It connects this entire narrative back to the New Testament, Matthew 24.25-28.
Can you remind us what that says?
The source quotes, "Behold, I have told you before. Wherefore, if they shall say unto you, Behold, he is in the desert, go not forth. Behold, he is in the secret chambers, believe it not."
Desert, secret chambers.
Exactly. The source clearly links those words to the alleged discovery location, the desert outside Uruk, and the potential tomb or secret chamber.
And the rest of the quote.
"For as a lightning come out of the east, and shineth even unto the west, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be." The source uses this passage, associated with warnings about false claims before the second coming, to frame the entire Gilgamesh-Nimrod story it presented.
Wow. So it ties the alleged archaeological find and the DNA conspiracy theory directly into biblical end times prophecy.
That's the final connection the source makes, yes. It's quite a complete, self-contained narrative it presents.
It certainly takes you on a journey, doesn't it?
A wild one, yeah.
From archaeological claims in ancient Uruk, a potential tomb site matching epic descriptions, through these controversial links to Nephilim, fallen angels, Nimrod,
Right.
and then onto these specific, totally unverifiable claims about remarkably preserved remains.
It's alleged military retrieval ops near a major U.S. base,
All tied together by this theory about DNA extraction,
linking it to the Human Genome Project.
and framing it all as part of a larger Babylon rising scenario, potentially connected to prophecy.
It's a lot to take in, and it's
Absolutely.
crucial, really crucial for everyone listening to remember. We've strictly presented the claims as laid out in this specific source material.
Absolutely. We haven't confirmed anything. We haven't debunked anything. We haven't added anything outside of its narrative.
Our job here was just to unpack this particular story for you as presented in the source.
Precisely. And now, really, we turn it over to you. What do you make of this? This extraordinary convergence, as the source presents it, of ancient texts, alleged discoveries, military action, genetic science, and modern-day speculation.
It's quite a tapestry the source weaves.
It is. And maybe here's a final provocative thought for you to consider, based entirely on this source's perspective.
Okay.
If, as this source suggests, the underlying goal in Iraq was to obtain ancient DNA, possibly Gilgamesh's, for some future use. And if, as the source notes, troops eventually left the region.
Right. Mission accomplished according to their logic.
What might this particular source's narrative imply about what has been accomplished? And following their line of thought, what potential developments might lie ahead now that this phase, according to them, is complete.
What comes after Babylon Rising, from their viewpoint? Definitely something to chew on.